Welcome to the Real Estate Finder podcast. I'm Matthew Maschler, real estate broker with the Signature Real Estate Companies, and with me, the co-host of the podcast and my real estate partner, Jill Glanzer. Hey, Jill, how are you?
I'm doing well.
All right. What are you working on?
So I'm working on a deal where I represent a buyer and I'm closing in a couple weeks. Super excited for her. And I had an interesting call this morning from the title company asking me what my commission is and transaction fee is as the real estate broker.
And you're representing the buyer.
I'm representing the buyer.
Mm-hmm.
So I have that. You pretty much have this question all of the time. And you would just say what your commission is. But this one was a little more complicated because the commissions were coming from a couple of different places, right? When you represent a buyer, the National Association of Realtors does require you to have your buyer sign a buyer representation agreement. And it basically outlines the commission that's due to you from them, plus the transaction fee, and outlines your duties to them, right? So this particular buyer did sign the buyer broker agreement explaining what her commission due to me is, but that commission is reduced by the amount the seller pays or by the amount the listing broker pays, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in this particular transaction, the listing broker was paying 2%. She had signed a buyer broker agreement where she was agreeing to pay us 3%.
She is your buyer.
She is your buyer. My buyer
Your buyer, you
signed a buyer representation agreement for 3%.
3%.
Right, to be paid to the broker plus a $4.99 transaction fee. Okay. So in the particular listing that she loved, before we went to see it, I asked what the commission was, and she said it was 2% from the listing broker.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so my buyer knew that she would be responsible for the 1%.
So you write a contract, and with the contract is an addendum that specifies that the listing broker will pay the buyer's broker 2%.
Right, exactly. It was really that yes, exactly. There was a commission agreement drawn up for 2% that was signed before I submitted the offer. Then in the offer, because my buyer did not want to pay the 1%, right? This is an expensive house. It's a lot of money. And so I negotiated on the addendum with her offer, addendum FF, in the original offer for the seller
to pay 1%.
To pay her, okay, 1%. Right. And that, yes, the buyer, the seller pays the buyer the 1%, and then the buyer is going to give it to me, the 1%. That's how it's written. That's why I'm saying it like that.
And why didn't you write it that the seller would pay the buyer's agent 1%?
Because the addendum that I used, which is by the Florida Association or the Florida Bar, is called Addendum FF, and it's very specific in that it says that the commission is being paid by the seller to the buyer as to make up for the buyer broker agreement. I don't have the exact words. I can get them for you, but I checked it literally right before this. So that's why I'll pull it up for you.
Okay.
So anyway, I wanted her to not have to pay me, right?
Her is the buyer.
House had been the buyer because the house had been sitting on the market for a very long time, right? So there was a couple back and forths, and the seller only agreed to pay 0.25%, right? So my buyer loves the house. She was happy with the price we settled on, and she was okay with paying me or the buyer broker. I'm the buyer's broker. She was okay with paying me 0.75%, and the seller would give her 2.25. She would pay the rest of the 0.75. I know this sounds very confusing, and I hope it's not
confusing to me at all.
Okay.
I got this.
All right.
The listing broker will pay the buyer's broker 2%.
Correct. And then the buyer,
seller themselves. I mean, I would have written it that the seller will pay the buyer's broker 0.25%.
Right. So,
and then the buyer is going to pay their own broker 0.75%.
Correct. So that's the way the commission. If we want to split hairs here, I can literally read you the FF addendum. It's interesting. Okay, because it does explain that it's the seller paying the buyer, crediting the sum to the buyer, right? And then the buyer's going to pay. It's very strange. So anyway, so I negotiated that. It's all negotiated. And this title company calls me and says, your commission is not written on the contract. I said, what do you mean? That isn't governed by, I could put anything on the contract, right? Like there is a part in the contract that says who the listing agent is. and then who the buyer's agent is. And in the old days, right, when the MLS governed commission, a lot of people would just stick the commission in there. But it doesn't mean that that governs the commission. The real governor of the commission was the MLS. And now the real governor of the commission, right, is that compensation agreement and that buyer broker agreement, right? And maybe a combination of an addendum, FF, or something that's written in the contract. So this particular title agent says to me, well, you don't have anything written in there and I can't put it on the settlement statement. I says, well, wait a minute, you go by that every time? I just thought it was interesting that she said that she goes by what's written in the contract.
But there's other contracts.
Right.
For instance, if the seller has a mortgage on the property.
Right.
And the mortgage is going to be paid off with the proceeds.
Right.
That doesn't need to be in the contract. That's in the title report. So if you could, so addendum FF is in the contract.
Correct.
It's an addendum to the contract.
But the compensation agreement and the buyer broker agreement is not part of the contract.
It's never in the contract, and the compensation agreement is never in the contract.
In the contract. So I thought it was interesting that this title agent,
she's wrong,
said those words to me, and I didn't want to hassle her. I mean, I explained to her, I go, wait a minute, you go by that? I go, listen, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm trying to understand what your process is.
Right.
So then she was like, well, I need these things that you're talking about, this buyer representation agreement. I need the compensation agreement so that I know what I put on my settlement statement. And I explained it very clearly to her. And I did send it to her to make things smooth so that she would understand where everything is. But I just thought it was interesting. I don't know. Like, then I started thinking about other title agents. Like, how are they figuring out what the commission is? How do they know what the actual correct commission is?
Well, so here's the thing. They don't need the documents. Like, it's weird. Some title companies are taking the position that they need to enforce the NAR rule, which is not a law, it's a club rule. They're taking the position that they need to enforce that by seeing the buyer broker agreement. The title agents can put the amounts in, like, right? They can put the amounts in, right? And if the buyer doesn't object and the seller and everybody looks at everything and says it's right, they don't need to see the contracts to prove that it's right because there's no dispute.
Right.
But some, to cross their I's and dot their T's, belts and suspenders, are asking for the documents. So you give them the buyer broker agreement and you give them the compensation agreement, and they'll see, right? You give them the buyer broker agreement, it says 3%. You give them, which is then going to confuse them because then they're going to charge.
Right. I had to, because I had to explain it that it was reduced by the amount. It was reduced by the amount blank blank. So it's this.
Here's the buyer broker agreement. It says 3%. Here's the compensation agreement that I have with the listing broker. It used to be enforceable by the MLS. It's not. So there's an agreement between the two brokers that listing broker will pay buyer's broker 2%. That reduces the 3% in the compensation agreement, right? And here's the agreement from the seller that they're going to pay 0.25. So charge the seller 0.25. Actually, charge the seller, add 0.25 to what you're charging the seller, right? Because the seller's going to pay the listing agreement, the listing agent, 5 or 6%, and then 2.25 is going to go to the buyer's agent and charge the buyer 0.75. So a total of 3% is going to the buyer's agent. That's how it should work out. Did you eventually settle it with the lady? Did she figure it all out?
Yeah, I sent her everything, and I gave a very detailed, clear explanation of how it's being paid. But it was very difficult to explain over the phone. She didn't get it. Mm-hmm. So I explained. You can see it there because I copied you on it.
Yeah. All right. Well,
I thought it was interesting. I think the part that was most disturbing, though, to me, was that on page 13 of the contract, she's only looking there to know what the commissions are. And like, I don't put those commissions. I don't put commissions in there.
And it's been a full year. We're recording this on August 19th. It's not going to drop until the end of August or September. But, the rule took into effect August 17th of 2024. It's been a full year. And this person at the closing agent, the closing agent is not trained, right?
Right.
You should tell them, we got to talk to her boss and tell her, train your staff. Train your staff. Right. Anyway, this stuff's confusing. Anyone out there who's listening, if you have any questions about buyer broker agreements, how agents are compensated, how the listing agent is compensated, how the buyer's agent is compensated, who pays, is it the listing agent or the seller that's paying the buyer's agent or the buyer directly, who pays, what fees. If you have any questions about that, please reach out to me at matt@realestatefinder.com. I'm happy to explain it. I can do it in private or we can do it on the show, your choice. But we are experts at this. We've been doing it a very long time. I've been using buyer broker agreements for over 10 years. So it's not just 1 year that I've been doing it. And it used to confuse people a lot. It would confuse the closing agents a lot when they saw stuff that they didn't know. But at this point, it is standard and they should know what they're doing. And then Jill, you have a showing, right?
Yep, I got to run.
All right. So
Thank you.
We'll end it here. Good luck. Hope that thing closes, and tell that processor to give me a call. Thank you for joining us on the Real Estate Finder podcast. Looking forward to helping you with all of your needs in real estate buying, selling, renting, and figuring out who pays what fees.
The future looks bright and the storms pass by. The sky's dark blue and it's almost that time. Light shows, cameras flash when I pass. Living in the moment, forget about the past. They save the best for last. Matthew Mania, we about to make a splash. Life is a marathon full of sharp turns. Gotta keep pace while the hands on the clock turns. High stakes, 5-star real estate. I run a show, you can tell the boss in the place. Electricity, energy, it vibrates. I'm always on time even if I'm late. I make dreams come true, living my life, hope the same for you. Success in my sights, got a real clear view. If you don't know the time, I'll give you a clue. You know what time, you know what time, you know what time it is. Yeah. You know what time, you know what time, you know what time it is. You know what time, you know what time, you know what time it is. You know what time, you know what time, you know what time it is. You know what time it is. You know whose time it is. You know what time it is. Matthew Mania, the time is his. You know what time it is. You know whose time it is. You know what time it is. Matthew Mania, the time is his. Yeah, got him shook, scared, can't look. We're not afraid of the big